Joining groups, joining spiritual groups, magical groups, cults, whatever. Let's talk about this. As you know, I've been dealing with a lot of trouble with cults for years, mainly because I don't do group thing. I don't, never been involved with a group. Never, I tried it a few times, never liked it. Directly, I'm talking about. I've met groups that were fine. I, it's just not for me. I don't like taking orders. I don't like giving orders. I don't like it. I'm too much of a selfish bastard that way. I'm too wrapped up in myself to be involved in a group. Brother, I'm the kind of person who walks away from people. That's just what they annoy me. That kind of thing. It's just my personality type. I don't suffer fools lightly, and I don't take shit. And I don't impose my shit on others by forming a group. And I get people all the time to say things to me like, "Yeah, you should start like a magic group or something like that, or your own." And I'm like, firstly, I don't care enough. Secondly, I'm a lazy fucker that way. That takes an element of control in people. And it also, it's my attitude is that, like, just leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. Everything will be fine. That's the end of that. I just don't have time. I'm not Mr. Team Player at all, either leading it or being in it or anything like that. I just like watching soccer on TV, and that's about it. Or a band. That's the team thing. Even when I was in bands, I was I was always like, I wanted to do my own thing. It's just the nature of me. Now that's not everybody. Some people flourish in groups. Some people flourish in covens and magic circles and in organizations and churches, and that's okay. I mean, that's their personality type. It's okay. The problem is that when they lose their personal identity to the church or the leader or whatever like that, right? So, for instance, I'll give you an example. The the person who joins up with a group. See, that was always the great irony of Thelema, was that Crowley told them all. It was just like that scene in Monty Python. You've all got to do your own thing, and yes, we all got to do it like that. And in Thelema, he said, like, "Don't follow me," and yet that's exactly what happened. It's very difficult, and it's because he was so interesting and so good. But it's it wasn't everyone in Thelema, of course, but this is the inherent danger. There's lots of people out there who are looking for something, and they bounce from thing to thing. Like they'll start off like they want to be a born again Christian, then they get into SJW stuff, then they get into climate change stuff, then they get into peace movement, then they get into Jehovah's Witnesses, then they get into Mormons, then they get into New Age stuff, then those types. And it's while there's nothing wrong with people searching and looking, they're kind of like pathological or congenital cult joiners, people who bounce from one to the other. And these are the ones that the cult leaders look out for. Cult leaders look out for two kinds of people. One, they're like that they need to join cults, and others who are broken people. They've had a bad life. They've been abused as kids. They've had a bad breakup. They've had a trauma at some point. Usually educated people and highly educated people, and these highly educated people don't find in their in their education and in their intellectual life and acumen the tool or skill sets to survive trauma, heartbreak, pain, the loss of a child, the breakup of a marriage. And this is how they often drift into cults, because the cult leader, who's nearly always a psychopath, will fill the missing ghost in their soul, and then will hold on to them forever. They'll never let them go. See, that's always the trademark of a cult leader. A cult leader never wants the uh, the members to leave. He or she has to hold on to them forever. And you remember that the Family of God song, "Dad After All," and there was a lyric in that. So the most disturbing lyric in that song was, "And for sending the searchers to bring us back home, we vow to do our best." Sending the searchers, they were cult members sent out to get the cult members who tried to escape. That's always the hallmark of a cult. They they never let people go. Loads of reason for that. One, it's a way of warning the ones in the cult that you will never leave, so you might as well not try and escape. And secondly, it's a way of uh, not letting outsiders know the secrets that go into the cult. And they also, but they'll have already have messed up with their social lives and their skill sets in order to make sure they can't survive outside the cult. Their whole sense of identity will be based around waiting for an event to happen, a terminal event. And that to me is an enormous amount of work. But these cult leaders are incredible control freaks, and they will keep dossiers. And they are obsessed with people, keeping dossiers, keeping records, keeping names, and this kind of thing. And that would be a cult. Now there'd be a spiritual group where you would have, say, a central leader who's having their ego served by the rest. And you get that, like the kind of Carlos Castaneda, and he's done some good stuff, I have to say, and no problem there, with the work, some of the work he's done. And Carlos Castaneda and his group of witches, he had these bunch of women that, okay, they kind of served him, had sex with them, and that's okay. I have no problem with that. But weird things happened, like some of them disappeared, and after he died, because they had no sense of self identity without him, they committed suicide. See, that's not good either. So, but can you blame Carlos Castaneda 100% for that? No, you have to kind of blame the women that were actually following him. There's a point where self responsibility has to come into all this stuff, and that would be the midpoint one. The good point would be well established spiritual groups that have been around for a long time that don't have a reputation of chasing members down, and there's lots of them. They're not obsessed with recruiting new members. In fact, they shun new members, lots of them. And these are the real legit ones. They don't like have Facebook pages where they're saying they're channeling from the super beings or something. They don't work like that. They're involved in magic practice. And like for instance, I'm friends with a witches coven in Italy, and they actually came out of a necessity to survive Mussolini's fascist regime in the 1930s in Sicily, and it became that's what they came out of. And prior to that, other groups would have had they were born out of survival, basically, of the fascists in Italy, and that's how they ended up in the north of Italy after being in the south. And lots of the women who founded that, their husbands and sons were killed in World War II by the Spanish fascist government. They were recruited and went off and died in shit places like that. And there was a huge hex placed on Mussolini by those mothers, and we all know what happened to him. And this kind of thing goes on in lots of places. They're hidden. They're protective forces. The film Suspiria, the second one, showed that quite well. That it bordered between women. These women were bordered between taking care of one another in a world that was difficult, but they also were tyrannical as well against like young girls that saw through them and things like that. So getting involved in spiritual groups, I would say this: go in there if it's an interesting thing, an ashram, a Wicca coven, a druidry group, a anything, anything, right? Don't go in there thinking you found the answer. That's very important. That's number one. Go in there with an open mind, but a sense of protecting your own psychic space. That's an important one. And as soon as elements of control appear in the leadership, leave. And by the control, I mean having to basically, if the leader has something like, I've got a special message from a super being, and this is what they am saying to me, run a fucking mile. Run a fucking mile, if you have any sense. That's you see things like there's a hierarchical structure. You're told how to behave, what to eat, how to drink, who to marry, how to live, and it's all black and white, and there's no gray area. That's always a bad. Don't ever let anyone ever tell you how to live your life. And don't tell another person how to live their life either. But that's important, like when they start restricting your diet. And it's not just saying, have you tried this diet? It's healthy. They'll actually tell you, like in Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, you can't drink tea, have caffeine. You cannot have it. And then I say why. As soon as you're the restricting of diet is a very basic way of controlling a person, because if you can say to them, okay, we're only going to eat paleo, or we're only going to eat vegan, or we're only going to do, what you put is a mandate on their survival in order to procure energy to feed their physical body. Yeah, and it's an instant form of slavery. That's why the big religions say you can't have pork or you can't do this. They put a mandate out there, or fish on Fridays. It's if you can control someone's ability to procure energy to keep themselves alive physically, you've got them in all kinds of other ways. So always be very wary of them forcing diets upon you, or dietary type dogmas. But that's like not to say there isn't good groups out there. There are many good groups out there, and I wouldn't be the type to be involved. I get invited to all kinds of things and join all kinds of things, and I just politely say no, because I'm just couldn't be arsed. I just like working on my own thing. I think the ideal thing is always to be solitary in your spiritual life, in your magical life, is always to be solitary. And that's why the idea of paganism coming to as chaos paganism, that I wrote that article on the Moss Upon Stone's website, I think that's basic. That works for me, and if it works for you, great. It makes life more interesting. It makes the universe and the natural world around you much more fantastical and enjoyable. And there's no rule book, zero. The only book is like what your impulses tell you, and what your intuition says to you, and then that's it. After that, you're fine. So that's it. So yeah, be very careful if you enter spiritual groups. Just don't jump on anything. We all know those. I'm sure you can leave comments down below. We all know those people who jump from one cult, one religion, one political system to the next, looking for something. And there's really no hope for those people, because they're also extremely dangerous people. They betray. They'll put a knife in your back in a minute for the next bullshit thing they're involved in. Very common with weak men. Weak. The whole thing that they say that a weak man looking to fit in is the most dangerous thing in the world. Well, these would be the ones who'll be recruited. That's the reason why their cults would recruit them. If he jumps or she jumps from cult to cult to cult, they're desperate to find an answer. They're desperate for people to tell them what to do and think, and they're extremely dangerous people. Look after yourselves. Bye.